After Jon Ossoff's defeat in Georgia's 6th congressional district, there's been a number of Democrats in Congress that have called for the resignation of Nancy Pelosi, citing the obvious fact that her name is toxic for the Democratic Party's brand. Now, it's not just that Nancy Pelosi is a toxic figure among conservative and Republican voters. She's actually quite disliked among the Democratic Party and progressives as well, because she represents everything wrong with the Democratic Party establishment. She is bought off by special interests. She refuses to get on board with single-payer healthcare, which a majority of the Democratic Party base wants, and she's become an obstacle to progressive policies, yet she continues to remain the leader of the so-called liberal opposition party. When she's not liberal, she's a centrist at best, but she's actually quite conservative on a number of issues, so she is not the person who needs to be leading the resistance against Donald Trump. So the time for Nancy Pelosi to go has been long overdue. However, of course, the second largest cheerleader for the Democratic Party quickly rushed to her defense.
You want me to sing my praises? Is that what you're saying? Why should I? Well, I'm a master legislator. I am a strategic, politically astute leader. They will always make a target. Senator Reid was a target. Senator Daschle was a target. Tip O'Neill was a target. I am a target. But I think I'm worth the trouble, quite frankly.
Go ahead, girl. Go ahead, girl. Go ahead, girl. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi reminded haters and critics of her credentials on Thursday after a number of Democrats called for her to step aside after her starring role in Republican attack ads against Jon Ossoff led some to conclude that she was to blame for his defeat in Georgia.
You see these commercials that tie these candidates to Leader Pelosi week in and week out. You got to beat the Republican, and you got to carry this very toxic Democratic brand on your back too. That's a tough thing to ask a candidate running for Congress.
It seems as if Republicans have mastered the art of the Jedi mind trick. Because on the subject of Nancy Pelosi's leadership, Democrats are suddenly sounding a lot like Republicans. Take, for instance, this guy back in 2010.
Are we going to fire Pelosi?
Michael Steele, how did you manage to trick Democrats into adopting exactly that view of Nancy Pelosi and saying that because y'all said she is a zombie hoarding demon who's enormous and giant and floating over the cities, that they should drop her as their leader?
It's the art of the brand. That's his.
First of all, I can't not touch on how Nancy Pelosi referred to herself as, quote, a master legislator and a strategic, politically astute leader. That is a really strange way to refer to yourself. But regardless if those things are true and you are good at pushing bills through Congress, like the Affordable Care Act, she was instrumental in pushing that through Congress. The fact is that you're a multi-millionaire worth more than $100 million, and you are painfully out of touch with the collective Democratic Party voting base. You are an obstacle to progress. So the things we want, you're saying, no, we can't move in that direction. But getting to Joy-Ann Reid, she's implying that Democrats were somehow tricked by Republicans like Michael Steele because he was one of the main Republicans who were demonizing Nancy Pelosi over the years. And Joy-Ann Reid argues that Democrats who are calling for Nancy Pelosi's ousting are actually sounding a lot like Republicans because that's what Republicans also want. No, Joy, you have it completely backwards. The people calling for Nancy Pelosi's resignation, myself included, we don't like Nancy Pelosi because she sounds like a Republican. Case in point.
Do you feel like the move for Democrats now is to make single payer a plank in the 2018 platform?
No, I don't.
And when it comes to Democrats sounding like Republicans, I've got another one for you, Joy.
Health emergencies can't wait for us to have some theoretical debate about some better idea that will never, ever come to pass.
See, Joy, those are Democrats that sound like Republicans. You are a Democrat that sounds like a Republican because you attack progressives consistently and you only support neoliberal, centrist to conservative candidates like Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton. So she goes on, though, nonetheless, to suggest that we're not thinking for ourselves here. We're not against Nancy Pelosi because of her corporatism and her basically stopping any and all attempts for us to fight for single payer. She insists that we are against Nancy Pelosi because we've been duped by the Republican Party.
I mean, the ordinary ordinary people, Joan, probably do not know who Nancy Pelosi is. Let's just be honest. People don't know who
that's not true.
No, but ordinary people may not. But the Republicans have gotten Democrats convinced that every person on the street is walking around in terror of Nancy Pelosi, including this guy, Tim Ryan, who wants Nancy's job. Let's be honest. He wants Pelosi's job.
He ran for it
and he lost.
So Tim Ryan is politically ambitious, and that's why he's attacking Nancy Pelosi. And look, maybe that's the case, but if you have a leader who saw the Democratic Party's march off of a cliff, who oversaw their defeat in nearly 1,000 legislative seats across the country, then I think it's pretty legitimate to question whether or not the party needs new leadership. I mean, that's what you do. If you keep losing, you question what you're doing wrong, and leadership is usually the first one to go. I mean, questioning Nancy Pelosi's leadership is something that is reasonable to do if you actually want to win, but nonetheless, Joy talks about how frustrated she is that Democratic lawmakers would quickly come to denounce their own and call for the resignation of their own leader. Now, Joyanne Reid here is going to state in this next clip, ironically so, how much she doesn't like the fact that Democrats are willing to attack other Democrats.
If there was a Republican Nancy Pelosi, they would fight like hell. They would fight you in the street if you said anything bad about her. They have defended guys who beat up reporters. They have defended guys who made comments about legitimate rape. They will defend their people. They've got people that have gone down in sex scandals and then run for office with the full support of their party. One thing you've got to give Republicans, they don't allow you to go around beating up their people. They defend their people. Why are Democrats, they're men, well, they're men, but why are Democrats so quick to throw their own people under the bus?
I don't know, Joy. How could someone supposedly on the left throw their own people under the bus and bash them at every chance they get and imply that they're moochers and they're Bernie bros and responsible for gun violence? I mean, what kind of a monster would do that, Joy? Who could do such a horrible thing? But we really get into the main implication here with this next clip, and you know what's coming. It's inevitable. We don't dislike Nancy Pelosi because of her corporatism. Can you guess what the reason is going to be cited for in this next clip? It's because we're sexist. That's the implication. We don't like Nancy Pelosi because we're sexist.
Would you be surprised, Joan, if the next thing we hear from progressives is, oh my God, Elizabeth Warren needs to stand aside. She is now a target.
She cannot run for president.
She must stand down.
She's too angry. No, and I don't really think there's a coincidence that we're talking about women, including Hillary Clinton.
Exactly.
And so there's also this subtle, the whole battle in the party right now, which is a false battle in my opinion, but it's there between identity politics, so-called, and class politics. That's being fought here too, but in ways that people won't say, because Pelosi is associated with gay marriage, being from San Francisco, but also being staunchly for it. She's associated with feminism. She's associated with these things that certain elements of the party think should be downplayed to appeal to white men, rather than focusing on the base of our party, which is women, and particularly women of color.
So Joan Walsh doesn't really think it's a coincidence that we're talking about women exclusively here, including Hillary Clinton, even though they're the ones that brought up Elizabeth Warren's name, for example. She also states that there's a false battle between identity politics and class politics, and certain elements of the party want to downplay identity politics, so that way the party can appeal more to white men. So with that statement alone, Joan Walsh proved that she is completely out of touch. There's no battle between identity politics and class politics. Those are not mutually exclusive things. The problem that we have with your use of identity politics is that you use identity politics to smear progressives, and you use identity politics to the detriment of class politics. They think that because Tom Perez is the first Latino DNC chairman, or that the new Californian Democratic Party leader, for example, is gay, that that's enough for those minority groups, when that's not even the case at all. A gay corporatist or a Latino corporatist isn't going to represent marginalized minorities better than a straight white male just because he's gay or Latino. Just getting people descriptive representation means nothing if you're not actually going to fight for economic justice on behalf of those disadvantaged groups. So the inherent problem with their exclusive focus on identity politics, keyword here on exclusive focus, is that as a gay man, they pretend to support me. They'll say, well, we support your right to marry, but they're only accepting one portion of my humanity, and they're denying other portions of it. So I say, I also have a right to healthcare. But yet, we have people like Nancy Pelosi, who's supposedly an ally to the LGBT community, who is stifling any attempt of Democrats to push forward with a single-payer system, when that would benefit people, particularly socioeconomically disadvantaged gay people and transgender people. So they think that they're on the right side of history, and they're looking out for the rights of marginalized groups, but they're still depriving marginalized groups of economic justice by doing the bidding of their their corporate donors. And this is the problem. Their corporate donors will only loosen the leash just enough so that way corporate Democrats can support something like gay marriage. But when it comes to extending healthcare to gay people or African Americans in the form of single payer, well, their donors won't let them do that. So identity politics offers Democrats a convenient way to pay lip service to us and pretend like they're on our side when behind the scenes, they're actually doing the bidding of their donors while pretending to be an ally to disadvantaged, marginalized groups. And they couldn't care less about us in actuality. Identity politics and class politics are inextricably linked. Getting a first woman president elected doesn't do anything for regular women if that woman isn't actually going to fight for economic justice for women or fight for the rights of women abroad and not bomb them in foreign countries. But they don't get this. They don't get this at all. And they use identity politics as a way to smear us and slander us, since they don't want to debate us on the merits of our argument. They just want to say, you know what? I think that these Bernie bros dislike Nancy Pelosi not because of her policies or the policy she's stopping us from pushing, from moving forward with, but because she's a woman, and they just don't like women. They don't like seeing women in powerful positions. Is that so? Well, how do you deal with the fact that most of us voted for Jill Stein, we support Tulsi Gabbard for president in 2020, and we support Tulsi Gabbard being promoted to Nancy Pelosi's position? I mean, how do you reconcile that? And when it comes to shutting down debate, they're literally doing this right now. They're implying that we're sexist because we dislike Nancy Pelosi, when she's disliked because she's a neoliberal corporate shill who's blocking single-payer healthcare, which would help all marginalized groups that these Democratic Party hacks pretend to care about so much. So what they're doing here in this segment is rich-splaining. They're patting marginalized minorities on the head and they're saying, look, we care about you. We're fighting for you. When they don't actually give a damn about marginalized groups, people of color, LGBT people, immigrants, they don't. But Joy-Ann Reid doubled down on her sexism hypothesis with an article that she wrote for the Daily Beast titled "Leave Nancy Pelosi Alone," where she compares opposition to Nancy Pelosi to birtherism. I'm not even joking. So she states the anti-Pelosi campaign worked because it played on certain voters' eagerness to demonize a woman of a certain age and a level of ambition, just as birtherism worked on those who are freaked out by a black man with a foreign-sounding name. Again, Joy, we don't not support Nancy Pelosi because Republicans planted that seed in our heads. We don't like Nancy Pelosi because she's a corporate tool. She takes money from the health insurance industry and then refuses to support a single-payer healthcare system. That's the reason why we don't like her. It has nothing to do with her gender or her sex. It has nothing to do with who she is as a person. These attacks we are launching against Nancy Pelosi are not ad hominem by any stretch of the imagination. We are citing policy differences and how she is refusing to listen to a majority of the Democratic Party base. And yet, Joy-Ann Reid wants to talk about Democrats who sound like Republicans. That's what we're saying. We don't like Democrats who sound like Republicans, hence why progressives are trying to move the party to the left, in the right direction, in the progressive direction. And that's what would help them win. So if you truly care about the Democratic Party, then you should allow constructive criticism and this debate to take place. I mean, Nancy Pelosi has been the leader since 2006. It's time for new leadership, and the fact that she lost almost 1,000 seats across the country, or that Democrats lost that much seats under her leadership, proves that we're right, not you, Joy.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.